So, Jai Hind, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are back with our flagship lecture, which we undertake every Thursday. And we are very fortunate that today we shall be covering a very, very important subject. Though this subject has been dwelt by a large number of people since the time of 1962 war happened, and then thereafter, a lot of writings have taken place. Each country has its own perception or own logic as to why their claim is right. But today we will have somebody who is a hardcore professional, and he will try to highlight that the Chinese claims are actually a part of their expansionist agenda, which they have done and implemented on ground since they came in power on 1st October 1949. And whatever they claim, the Indian territories in eastern Ladakh and elsewhere. So that is also part of that gimmick. We couldn't have got a better speaker than General Gajinder. I have known him, and he's a dear friend. We have done high command together, and today he will be unveiling his thoughts on this particular issue. So before I invite him to speak, I would request Colonel Tripathi to introduce the speaker, please.
It's my privilege to introduce General Gajinder Singh. I've known him for good around 3 decades, or a little more than that, from the same regiment. And about him, about a brief, Major General Gajinder Singh was commissioned into 6th Battalion of the Gangwal Rifles in 1985. The officer has served in all operational sectors in India in various capacities. He has commanded his battalion in high altitude area along Indo-China border and the Assam Rifle sector, engaged in counterinsurgency operations in northeastern India, in the mountain division responsible for guarding the line of actual control. For his distinguished service, he was awarded Ati Vishish Seva Medal in 2019. He has vast experience in UN peacekeeping operations. He served as a military observer in Angola in 1997-98, Chief of Integrated Mission Training in Ethiopia and Eritrea 2003-2004, and Chief of Operations in Sudan in 2010-2011. Academically accomplished, he holds a Master of Philosophy from both Indore and Punjab universities and a PhD in Peace and Conflict Studies from Jamia Millia University. Upon retirement in 2021, Jan Singh embraced community work. A prolific writer and blogger with insightful articles on national security, leadership development, and community matters are featured on his blog, that is Seek to Transform, and as well as in various newspapers and journals. Over to Jan.
Adios.
Good morning, General Ashok, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak here. Today I'll be speaking on a very interesting subject, the historical invalidity of the Chinese claims on Ladakh. As General Ashok mentioned, that this subject has been covered by almost every person who is interested in China. So what is it new that I would be covering today? A disclaimer, I'm not an expert on Indo-China matters. I'm a scholar and a student like any one of you. As you are aware, Ladakh is a altitude desert, and it has captured the imagination of our country, more so in the recent past. Places like Daulat Beg Oldie, Depsang Plains, Galwan Valley, Gogra, Hot Springs, Pangangso, Demchok, they have become very familiar names. You can find these names on the Google Maps too. Unfortunately, the information that is shaping the opinion of our people is mostly made available to us through social media or the electronic media. And they are guided by the need for more and more views and more television rating points. So in such a scenario, what happens is that the facts get obscured first. And we tend to focus on the minor issues, the minor incursions, the standoffs on the line of actual control. Whereas the larger agenda or the larger narrative on the border dispute or the bigger boundary question is actually being influenced by the Chinese. So in this talk, I shall try and highlight that China's claims on Ladakh are absolutely incorrect and lack historical validity. I will cover this talk in about 6-7 parts. May I request for the first slide, please? So first, I will give a very brief description of the dispute in Ladakh. Thereafter, I'll cover what is the reason that China covets Ladakh. What is this great importance of Ladakh for China? Thereafter, I will speak about the unjustified occupation of Tibet and Xinjiang by China, followed by history of Ladakh from 7th to the 15th century. Thereafter, I'll cover the turbulent but a very impactful reign of the Namgyal dynasty. Dogras also ruled for Ladakh for about 100 years, and they had a very impactful actually time there. So we will cover that. We will look at the role of the British that they played during the great game that they played in this region in the 18th and the 19th century. And briefly, I'll cover what has happened to Ladakh after independence. So now, next slide, please. So the root of the long-standing conflict in Ladakh boils to the fundamental disagreement between India and China on the Ladakh Xinjiang border, which runs from Karakoram Pass to the Lanakla Pass. You can see this on the map too. And the dispute for the Ladakh-Tibet border, which runs from Lanakla to Innisla. So currently, Chinese have occupied about 38,000 square kilometers of this territory, almost entire Aksai chain and the surrounding areas. So with this being the bigger picture, the day-to-day issues that come up and the standoffs that happen are basically because of the difference in perception of the LAC. As you're all aware, that the line of actual control is not defined on the map as well as on ground. Actually, I've been suggesting and recommending in various forums that the first step that India must take is to define the LAC. It is going to benefit us more than it is going to benefit the Chinese. Now, what happens is that because of this, as the LAC is not defined, both the sides are very, very sensitive to loss of any territory. And at the same time, both the sides continue jockeying for more and more space to capture more and more areas. And the PLA is very adept at this. They employ something called the salami slicing tactics. This basically what it means is that they do very gradual and incremental incursions, which it is not easy to respond for the commanders on ground, nor it is possible for you to escalate the situation to a level where it will get out of control. So it is Ladakh, where because of what we fought the 1962 war, it is in Ladakh that we almost came to a war in 2020 and 2021. It is my considered opinion, Ladakh will be trigger for a future conflict between India and China, which may unfold anywhere along the 3,400 kilometers border. but the trigger will happen in Ladakh. So let us now explore the historical and geopolitical context of this complex problem to see how Chinese have been consistently denying historical agreements, historical treaties to illegally occupy the Indian territory in Ladakh. So now coming to the second part as to why China covets Ladakh, what is the importance of Ladakh? So Ladakh's strategic importance stems from its geographical position. It is a vital link between Xinjiang, which was earlier known as East Turkestan and is now the westernmost province of China, and Tibet. It provides almost an all-weather link through which you can supply men, material, and all sorts of goods. And this is what helps the Chinese to exercise control over this entire vital region. And this particular strategic or interest of the Chinese is not newly found. From 6th, almost 7th to 10th century, there was the Great Tang Empire, which ruled and consolidated China. It ruled from, if I'm correct, from 618. Can we have the next slide also, please? Yeah. So it ruled from 618 to almost 909 AD. So about 300 years. So the Tang Empire had occupied East Turkestan, and they were at great competition with who of all the countries? With the Great Empire of Tibet. So they were competing Tibet. And Tangs were always worried that the Tibetans will launch an offensive through Ladakh and annex East Turkestan from the south. You can see the big blue arrow. That is what they were worried about. And this arrow is actually passing through Ladakh. In 1717, a very interesting thing happened. It happened in the reverse order. East Turkestan was being ruled by the Sungar Mongols. So Sungar Mongols, in a surprise movement through the Aksai Chin territory, they came to Lhasa and ousted the Kasot Mongols, who were at that point of time ruling Tibet. So since then onwards, China has been very sensitive to this area from the point of view of its ability to control the to and fro movement from Tibet towards Xinjiang. Even in 1950, when the Chinese launched an offensive to capture Tibet at that point of time, while initially they launched their offensive from the east by first capturing Chamdo or Kamdo, whatever you want to call it, and the eastern passes. But their significant offensive came from the west. The troops which were stationed in the Xinjiang, they moved through Aksai Chin. They captured the border towns of Rutog and Gatok and threatened Lhasa from the west. So this is how Chinese view Ladakh territory. Even today now, the highway which passes through Aksai Chin, we all know that it is known as G219. And it is also, at some point of time, it was called the Western Highway or the Xinjiang Tibet Road. It is one of the most crucial links for China to exercise control over its vast western frontiers. So this is the importance of Ladakh. I have spent a lot of time on trying to tell you that why Ladakh is important for China. On the contrary, when we got independence, we had not even surveyed Ladakh properly, which was our own territory, and we had not made any efforts to actually guard our borders. Interestingly, Ladakh, because of its very interesting position, has been influenced from all the directions. If you see Ladakh from the north, it has been pulled by the Mongols and the Chinese. From the east, Ladakh has been always pulled by the Tibetans. From the northwest, by the Baltis. And most importantly, we have to remember that as Indians, that most importantly, they have been pulled by the Kashmiris, whether they were the Hindu Kashmiri kings of the first millennium, or subsequently the Islamic rulers of Kashmir, or the Dogras, or for that matter, the British. They have had a very strong pull on Ladakh from the south. Now we come to the next issue. China's claims on the Indian territory hinge on the premise that Tibet is rightfully part of China. I personally feel that it is a flawed assertion, because Tibet, I've written an article in the week on the glorious past of Tibet. Tibet historically existed as an independent nation with its own distinct culture, language, and governance. Tibet's history actually sparkles with periods of immense political, military, and cultural brilliance. Sometime in the 7th century, the Tibetans under Samson Gampo extended the Tibetan influence from the Caspian region, Caspian Sea, to the borders of China. They were dominating the Silk Route. For a brief period, in 763, Tibetans actually captured the capital of Tang Empire, that is known as Xi'an, for about 20 years, and they placed an emperor of their own choice in China. So subsequently, there was a treaty between Tibetans and Chinese. First treaty between Tibetans and Chinese was signed in 783 AD, in which the eastern boundary of the current Gansu province was fixed the boundary between Tibet and China. So while subsequently Tibet came under the influence of Mongols, it was only in 1720 that first time Chinese started directly kind of interfering in Tibetan affairs, when they placed 2 residents in Lhasa after they had evicted the Sungar Mongols. And these residents, known as Mengpaos, were actually dealing on behalf of the Chinese emperor. Similarly, East Turkestan, Xinjiang, fell under Chinese control at a later stage, further undermining the legitimacy of China's historical claims in this entire region. I will not speak about Xinjiang much, because our border dispute is more linked to the Tibet. So now I come to Ladakh. Ladakh's history is very interesting if you start reading. Subsequently, I can share with you the study material and other references. So, in the 7th century, as I mentioned earlier, when the Tang dynasty was ruling China, there was a bitter 3-year competition between Tibet and China. And this conflict actually impacted the Western Tibet. Western Tibet, as you are aware, is the portion which actually is west of the Mayum Pass. I don't know whether you people are okay. Come to the next slide, please. That will actually make it clear to you. Next one. Yeah, okay. Just leave it there. Mayum Pass is marked there to the extreme right of the slide, just above Puran. So So this competition between the Tangs and the Tibetans engulfed the entire Western Tibet. Western Tibet was earlier an independent kingdom, and it had more of an Indian influence actually. Because of Mansarovar, you will find many names which actually have Indian connections. There is a place called Tirthapuri there is a place called Minsar there. Subsequently I'll cover Minsar. And it also engulfed this competition between the two, also actually got the Arabs involved, it got the Mongols involved, it got the Kashmiris involved. Why I'm giving this backdrop is to see where Ladakh stood during this period from 7th to 10th century. So the fate of Ladakh, through which the opposing forces often moved this period of the history, not very clear although, but it is for sure that as it existed on the crucial trade and military routes, we are not sure who influenced it at that point of time, whether it was Tibet or whether it was Kashmir, whether it was independent, we are not clear. So at this point of time, we leave it at in this situation. Around 900 AD, a very interesting thing happened. An exiled Tibetan prince, he came into Western Tibet and he formed a kingdom of his own. So this kingdom, and how he came, that's a very interesting story. Some people say that he came and the king of Purang offered his daughter for marriage, and after that he extended this kingdom. So this kingdom, it is for sure, it is in the Ladakhi chronicles that this kingdom extended from Ladakh, the entire present-day Ladakh, Janskar, which is the Kargil district, Lahaul Spiti of Himachal Pradesh, and entire Western Tibet. So a very big kingdom was formed. Now when this king died, on his death, this was divided into three parts amongst his three sons. So the eldest son got Ladakh. When he got Ladakh, so in Ladakh he got the Leh, he got Damchok, he got Imis, which is Imisla, he got Hanle, and he also got Rudok. How he got Rudok, which is actually further into Tibet, I'm a little doubtful, but yeah, anyway, the chronicles say that he got Rudok also. The second brother got Guge and Purang. We can go back to that slide, which is showing the three kingdoms. Yeah. The second brother got Guge and Purang, which are marked in the green. So this is the Western Tibetan territory. And the third brother got Lahaul and Janskar. This is also a very interesting thing, that how the Lahaulis would actually control Janskar, but it is very, again, if you see the map, it is quite possible. And many times the kings of Kullu have moved along towards Janskar through this route. So this division happened. When this division happened, the chronicles define the boundary between the eldest brother and the Western Tibet, which is almost aligns with our perspective of the Ladakh-Tibet border. Our perspective of the Ladakh-Tibet border is that it runs from from Lanakla to Imisla. Lanakla to Imisla. So this particular chronicle says that this division was in this particular manner. So the historical evidence also suggests that Ladakh was an independent kingdom during this period. So from 10th century onwards, Ladakh was an independent kingdom. This particular Ladakhi dynasty, it existed till 1460. It had many distinguished kings. One of them is King Utpala. Utpala ruled from 1080 AD to 1110 AD. And Utpala, interestingly, is a Sanskrit name. It also indicates the influence of Kashmiri Hindu kings into Ladakh. Now, this is another story as to why how the lower Himalayan kingdoms had slowly turned into Hinduism, and how the Rajput chieftains had come up and they had actually established their kingdoms there. However, China disputes this historical fact also. It says that yes, there was a king like that, he owned all this, but this division between the three brothers was not a political division. China claimed that this division was just a distribution of feudal estates, or as they call it, manorial estates. It also says that it is Western Tibet which had a suzerain status or suzerain control over Ladakh. Although, if this is the logic applied by China, then they should be actually claiming the entire Ladakh. Then why only claim certain portions of Ladakh? The Indian view that Ladakh was a separate dominion during this period is upheld by many scholars. One of them is Margaret W. Fisher, Leo E. Rose. They have written a very interesting book called Himalayan Battleground 1963. If you are a student of Indian boundary dispute, please do read this book. Another one is Professor George Rorish, a Russian scholar. And then E.H. Frank. He's written a very interesting book called A History of Western Tibet. This was published in 1907. So here I finish with the one part of the Ladakhi kingdom's history, that is up to the almost 15th century. Now we will come to the rule of the Namgyals. As I mentioned earlier, it was very turbulent. Hats off to Namgyals who ruled Ladakh as an independent state, independent kingdom for such a long period, amongst so many people vying for their kingdom from different directions. So Ladakh's history now took a different turn in the 14th century. With what happened was that in Kashmir we had the Islamic dynasty actually arising. So the Kashmiris, they started eyeing Ladakh and also Western Tibet, that is Goge. Goge, if you search on the internet, is a very evolved kingdom. Please search and see how Goge had evolved as a kingdom in Western Tibet. So, and finally, Ladakh and Goge had to succumb to the Kashmiri pressure. And between 1440, 1450, they came under the Kashmiri rule. But Kashmiri rule didn't last for a very long time because they were having a lot of internal troubles. So Kashmiris had to leave them on their own around 1470. So during this period of turmoil, another dynasty rose, that is the Namgyal dynasty. So in the Namgyals, the most promising and the most distinguished king was a person called Shivang Namgyal, who ruled from 1555 to 1575 AD. During his time, Ladakh's influence extended across entire Western Tibet. So Western Tibet was actually under Ladakh's control during this period. Again, I hope I'm not going to too many details, because this is how the entire narrative actually will build. What happened thereafter was that Baltistan was being ruled by a person called Ali Mir Khan. So Ali Mir Khan, he captured Ladakh. When he captured Ladakh, he not only captured Ladakh, he desecrated all the Buddhist shrines, he destroyed the scriptures, and he also married his daughter to the king of Ladakh to make sure that his influence always remains. So all this happened, I think, towards the end of the 16th century, 1580s, 1590, during this period. And subsequently, again, Ladakh regained its independence from Baltistan, and they had a very distinguished king coming up. His name was Sengye Namgyal. Sengye Namgyal was, interestingly, grandson of Ali Mir Khan. And Sengye Namgyal, first thing that he did, what happened during this period was also happening that the Kashmiri dynasty was replaced by the Mughals in the major. And in China, the Ming Empire was crumbling. So you have to, this is all geopolitical context, how things are changing. So the Ming Empire was crumbling there. And in Tibet, there was another conflict raging. The conflict was raging between yellow and red hat sects. There was a tremendous struggle for influence in Tibet. So Sengye Namgyal, he took advantage of this opportunity and he occupied Gubei. This happened in 1630. So in 1630, he got more ambitious and he attacked Baltistan. But at Baltistan, the Mughals came rushing from Kashmir and they halted him there. And they asked him to, in fact, pay tribute and whatever fines to ensure peace with the Mughals from the Balti side. So this thing actually presses home the point that Ladakhis were under Kashmiri and Mughal influence at that point of time. So thereafter, what this all happened in around 1639. What this Sengye Namgyal did was that he again went into Western Tibet and he captured the areas up to Mayum. And first time in the history of Tibet that he crossed Mayum Pass and he got into the Sang province. People who are aware of Tibetan history, they know that Sang is the most important, is the heartland of Tibet. When Sengye Namgyal entered this area, there was a huge amount of confusion. Finally, Tibetan forces halted him at Mayum, and an agreement was signed between the two. Agreement was reached, I will not use the term signed, agreement was reached that all lands west of Mayum would be under the control of Ladakh. So this itself is very clear that there is no reason for Chinese to come and start actually claiming Ladakh. So this happened in 1641. So Sengye Namgyal's reign was followed by another great Ladakhi king called Deden Namgyal. Deden was a very smart politician. He was under tremendous pressure from the Mughals from the southwest and by the Baltis. So he kind of, as a political maneuver, he agreed that he will promote Islam in Ladakh and he was paying tributes to them. At the same time, he was consolidating his empire. During Deden Namgyal's time, the Ladakhi empire reached its peak in the sense that the entire present-day Ladakh, entire Western Tibet, plus entire Lahaul Spiti, plus upper parts of Kinnaur were actually with Deden Namgyal. So while all this was happening, another thing happened. In Tibet, the yellow hats, they became the dominating sect. And they were being supported also by the Mongols. So they, whereas Deden Namgyal and the kings of Ladakh and Bhutan were both red hat followers. So Ladakh made some statements in favor of Bhutan. So Tibetans, with the support of Mongols, launched an attack on Ladakhi kingdom. They surrounded, they in fact captured Leh. This happened in 1683, 84. And when this happened, he sent a message to the Mughals that I'm in trouble, I need help. So Mughals, always looking for such opportunities, within no time they reached there, and they defeated the army there. And after this, Mughals extracted their pound of flesh from the Ladakhis. They said that the Ladakhi king has to convert to Islam. First thing they put this. Second thing they said was that he has to give the annual tributes to the Mughals. And they also told him to mint the Ladakhi coins with the picture of the Mughal emperor. So, they kind of reasserted themselves, which they had done in the past many times. Again, they reasserted themselves in 1684. Mughals went back to Srinagar. And in the meantime, the Tibetans and Ladakhis had a treaty. So this famous treaty is called the Treaty of Tigmosgang. I can't pronounce this place easily, sir. Would you like to?
No, just tell me the name of the place.
Yeah. Tigmosgang.
I'll come to it later.
Tigmosgang. So they had a treaty, and in this treaty, firstly, why was the need for the Ladakhis to have a agreement with the Tibetans when they had already, Mughals had defeated them and they were supposed to go back? So there are many questions that come out of it. And why the treaty was made more favorable to the Tibetans while the Ladakhis had won the war. So one of the smart things that Tibetans did was, when they sent a delegation for this negotiations for this treaty, this was led by one of the Red Sect Lamas. Now, Red Sect Lama, who was revered by the Ladakhi king. So he had almost no choice but to accept whatever terms were offered to him. So now what were the terms of this agreement of 1684? Because this becomes a landmark agreement for our future discussions with the Chinese. So they said that the Ladakh-Tibet border was fixed at the Lahari stream near Damchok. Near Damchok, this border was fixed. This treaty also referred to the 10th century division of the kingdom between the three sons. And another thing was Ladakh secured the exclusive right for the wool trade from Tibet. Interestingly, Ladakh retained control of Minsar town near Mount Kailash to manage the Mansarovar shrine. So the revenue of Minsar town was coming to Ladakh kingdom till our independence. Whatever was collected at Minsar town, it was coming to Ladakh for management of the shrine. Now, there was another thing. Ladakh agreed to send something called law check missions. Some call it law check missions, trade missions with gifts to Lhasa once in 3 years. On the reciprocal side, they were to send Chaba missions from Tibet. Chaba missions are the missions which they carried a lot of tea for the Ladakhis. The tea used to come from China those days. So these were the broad agreements of this 1684 treaty. Mainly for us, it is important that the traditional boundary of Ladakh and Tibet was fixed at, as we understood, from Ladakh to Nisla. This is very clear. Now, again, the interpretation of this treaty also remains contentious. China contests its very existence only. And it says that logic missions were a sign that Ladakh was subordinate to Tibet. On the other hand, India's claims of this treaty are supported by numerous scholars. India further contends, rightfully so, that logic missions were actually just religious missions because Ladakh followed Buddhism. So they were giving tributes to the Dalai on religious grounds. It was not at all political in nature. So India also cites that after the Battle of Basco, Ladakh was firmly under the control of the Mughals. So after having seen the history of Ladakh from 7th to 15th century, one can clearly actually deduce that Western Tibet was always under the influence of Ladakh and not vice versa. Okay, so in the 18th century, we come to 18th century now, Ladakh maintained a very precarious independence. That's why I'm calling it turbulent times for their kings. Very precarious balance, because they were owing political allegiance to Kashmir, and they were having religious affiliations with Tibet. So that was kind of precarious position for them. This changed in 1834 when Gulab Singh, the Dogra ruler of Jammu, dispatched a force led by General Zorawar Singh to assert dominion over Ladakh. The Dogra army, which was about 4,000 strong, defeated the Ladakhis, who agreed for one-time indemnity and tributes. Zorawar Singh didn't stop there. He pressed further. And in 1939, he also captured Baltistan and actually established the Dogra rule over the entire, you can say, Jammu and Kashmir state. In 1841, Zorawar Singh's ambitious campaign extended into Western Tibet, capturing territories up to Taklakot. Taklakot is right next to the Mansarovar lake. So this move sparked a complex geopolitical struggle involving the Dogras, the Nepalese, the Tibetans, and the British and the King empires. Everyone got into that. Was actually upsetting the apple cart in a big way. And Dogras coming all the way up to Taklakot. So Tibetans responded in the same winter in 1841, and they evicted the Dogras back to Leh. When this happened, the Ladakhis got emboldened. They were not happy with the Dogra rule, so Ladakhis got emboldened. They got hold of a few Baltis, they got hold of Tibetans, and they laid a siege to the Leh garrison. This happened in 1842. So when this happened, reinforcements were sent from Jammu. When reinforcements came, and there was a battle of Trishul. Battle was fought in Trishul, where the actually Tibetan forces lost. The combined forces of Tibetans and Ladakhis lost. And on September 17th, 1842, a treaty was again signed. This treaty is signed properly. You can see this treaty on the internet also. And few things that happened during this treaty was, I'm good on time or I'm slow? Good time, yeah. So the Tibet acknowledged Dogra authority over Ladakh. This was accepted by the Tibetans. Gulab Singh, for the first time, relinquished all claims on Western Tibet. So it was in 1842 very clearly decided that Ladakh is under Dogras, and Western Tibet, we have no claims, it is under Tibet. So this got decided. Traditional borders were reaffirmed. When you say traditional borders, it always means Nanakla to Imisla were reaffirmed. Logic trade missions were permitted with the stipulation of being non-political. Now the Chinese regent or the Mingpao, who was at Lhasa, he reported this kind of as a victory to the King Empire, that this is what was a victory. And the Chinese continued to underplay even this treaty. So many treaties have happened, even this treaty they continue to underplay. Chow Lai wrote one letter in 1959. In that he mentioned that this treaty is not valid because this was signed by Tibet on its own and has not been ratified by China. They also said that this treaty is not valid because Xinjiang was not represented. Later on, they realized that if they will take this stance, it will mean that Tibet and Xinjiang had independent treaty-making powers, so they withdrew from this stance. They started saying, no, this was there. It was not a treaty. It was just a non-aggression pact between the between the two powers. So that is how they started actually kind of. On the other hand, as far as India is concerned, our stance is very clear that this treaty cannot be nullified. It is there in black and white, signed by two powers, with the full knowledge of the King Empire. Okay. So now, having covered the Dogras, whatever they did in Ladakh, we will see what role the Britishers played and how the great game was played by the Britishers, Russians, and the Chinese in this very interesting region, which now also covers the all Central Asian republics. So, what happened was that after the Anglo-Sikh War, this treaty of between Tibet and Ladakh was signed in 1842. At that point of time, Gulab Singh was a fiduciary under the Sikhs. In 1846, when the Anglo-Sikh War happened and Sikhs lost the war, the entire area between the Beas River and Indus was handed over to Gulab Singh as an independent dominion. And why the Kashmir state always remains slightly different is also owes the background to this agreement. At that point of time also, unlike other princely states, the Britishers had not taken over any internal management rights from the Dogras in the Kashmiri kingdom. So that kind of actually continues later also. So at that point of time, the Britishers tried to demarcate the Ladakh-Tibet border. So they wrote to the Chinese that please come, let's have a discussion and let's fix the border. But Tibetans and Chinese, despite repeated requests from Britishers, did not come up and sign any agreement. So Britishers just we can take out the slide. Actually, I think people can see the
McCartney mission to Beijing.
I'll speak about it later. I don't need the slides hereafter. What the Britishers did was they decided that the traditional boundary from Lanakla to Imisla would be the border of the Kashmir state with Tibet. So this was decided in fact. So now you must be wondering that I have taken most of my time, but I have not spoken at all about the Ladakh. I've been only speaking about Ladakh-Tibet border. I have not spoken about Ladakh-Xinjiang border. It is so because this particular border, Ladakh-Xinjiang border, which is from Karakoram to Lanakla, it was always used by the traders for movement from Yarkand to Leh, or from Kashgar to Leh, or from Hotan to Leh. It was being used. But it never came into contention till the Britishers arrived. And the great game started getting played in this region. So, what happened was that in the mid-1860s, the Chinese were evicted from East Turkestan by a combination of Muslim tribal groups. So their leader, a person called Yaqub Beg, he invited the Russians and Britishers into East Turkestan. There was a feeling amongst Westerners that there is huge amount of wealth, minerals, and rich resources in this area. So Britishers rushed towards Yarkand, Hotan, and Kashgar, and they established a consulate in Kashgar. They also opened a trading route through Kashmir Valley from Leh through Aksai Chin and going to Yarkand and onwards to Kashgar. So they opened a trade route also. While this was happening, Chinese were not in control of East Turkestan. At that point of time, Ranbir Singh, who was now we can have the slide, please. Ranbir Singh, who was the King of Kashmir, he took a forward posture and he occupied a forward post at, please go back to the first slide. Before that. Okay, no worries. So he occupied a outpost called Shahidullah, just north of the Karakoram Pass, and it is almost at the base of the Kunlun range. This particular forward posture remained for a short while. He had to actually pull back based on the insistence of the Britishers, because Britishers didn't want any problems with the Russians and the Chinese in that area. Yeah, next one, please. Yeah, so you can see Shahidullah. You can see the Kunlun range marked in the black, and you can see the Karakoram range. Shahidullah was occupied by troops of Ranveer Singh, which was finally evacuated after 4 or 5 years. And it was then reoccupied by the East Turkestani troops and taken over from them by the Chinese when they reconquested East Turkestan in 1877. So thereafter, Shahidullah always remained the southernmost outpost of the East Turkestanis or the Chinese in that region. Also, interesting thing to note is that the area between Karakoram Pass and the Kunlun range is it is called the Yarkand River Valley. Yarkand River Valley was almost inhabited, and it was not being controlled by any of the surrounding states. So for China to now come and start saying that this is their territory and they have claims over it is absolutely fictitious and incorrect statement. I'll come to another interesting thing called the Johnson Line of 1865. William Johnson of Survey of India, he carried out a detailed survey of Aksai chain area that time, and he put this line called the Johnson Line, which has the entire Aksai chain region within India. Subsequently, what happened was that this particular line, Johnson Line, was accepted by the Chinese for almost 3 decades. They never said that this is not the correct boundary. In 1893, a Chinese counselor in Kashgar, St. Petersburg, he handed over a map to the British counselor of Kashgar, and that map showed the alignment of the border, India-China border, in alignment with the Johnson Line. So what I'm trying to say is, Johnson Line, which is the claimed line of the Indians, was accepted by the Chinese from its inception in 1865 till good about 1898. They had accepted it. It was being reflected in their maps as such. But what happened in 1898? That suddenly the Chinese came up and they said that Aksai chain is theirs. So the many books say that it was the Russians who instigated them, because Russians and British were actually competing in Central Asia at that time and playing this a great game. So they instigated the Chinese to claim Aksai chain. So they claimed Aksai chain, and around 1896, the Britishers, they made an offer. They made an offer through the British Consul General at Peking that this line could be slightly toward the south. That means Aksai Chin could be given to Britishers, and the area south of the Lakstang Range. Lakstang Range is actually exactly in between Kunlun and Karakoram Range. The area south of that would be with India. So this was actually called the McDonald line. So India offered, not India, the Britishers offered Aksai Chain to the King Empire. Now, when it was offered to them, they didn't respond. They didn't respond. This was a proposal. They didn't respond. So this proposal had died its own natural death. As Indians, we have no reason to ever refer to McCartney-MacDonald line, because it was a mere proposal by the Britishers made to the Chinese at some point of time for some reason, which has not been accepted by them at that point of time. It is no more relevant and valid. So that is what is the importance of McCartney-MacDonald line. There has been no treaty or agreement on this portion of the border. Like there were so many treaties for the Ladakh-Tibet border, there has been no agreement here. So as a result, when the negotiations happened between Indians and Chinese in 1960, at that point of time, they referred to many published sources. So Chinese also quote many published sources of the Chinese origin. They also quote some British sources. So in this, the one source they quote is, it is Chin Ting Huang Yu Tu Shi. That is the geographical records of the western regions of China, ordered by the great king. And in the 1782 edition, what it says, I'm just trying to, it says Hoshian. Hoshian is Xinjiang. Hoshian is an abode of Muslims, it says. It is a component part of our territory. And according to old historical records, here lies the river sources. So this is such a vague statement based on which they are saying that Aksai Chin belongs to them. This is one. The second one is, I will avoid calling out the Chinese name. I'll straightway come to the English name. It is the official annals of the empire of the Great Qing dynasty. So this is somewhere in 1820. It says Nimangi Mountains are in the south of Hoshian. Nimangi Mountains are south of Xinjiang. There are two mountains in the east and west, and the Hoshian river springs therefrom. Hoshian river, when they talk about Karakash. So based on this, these two documents, the Chinese claim that source of Karakash river lies in Xinjiang, and that is why this area should belong to them. I just, how Indians have refuted, there are many, detailed claims submitted by the Indians, but one of them is that the 1762 edition of the geographical records, while the 1782 edition, they have claimed that Hoshian River comes from there and it should belong to us. 20 years earlier, they had said that Hoshian River originates from the Nanshan Mountains, and Nanshan they call is Kunlun. So there is no consistency in their claims when they are talking about these. The Chinese have also cited many British explorers like Moorcroft and Cunningham as saying that Karakoram is the boundary between Ladakh and Xinjiang. They are saying that. But Indians have said that Moorcroft and Cunningham never visited Aksai Chin. So there are many inconsistencies. If I have to sum up the Ladakh and Xinjiang border, I would say that there has been, this area was used by people to move. It was also used by the armies to move, but uh, Chinese had no presence, neither official or unofficial presence in this area ever. On the other hand, the Indians had regular records of mining, of salt in Aksai chain. They have been grazing in Aksai chain. So though all those records can be found with the state documents of the Kashmir state. So I think if I'm okay with time, I can continue for 5 minutes. If I'm not okay, then
In total 5 minutes.
so I'll just, we have to understand two more events which have a very important bearing on the India-China relation. One is the young husband expedition. If you people recall, in 1904, the British young husband expedition went to Lhasa, and it signed the Lhasa Convention with the officials of the Dalai Lama. You know, every convention comes out with some very interesting and historical facts, milestone, which needs to be referred time and again. So it said, this convention reaffirmed all the past treaties between India and Tibet. Everything which was signed between India and Tibet was valid. And it also reaffirmed the border between Sikkim and Tibet, which holds good even now. Then the next thing was Shimla Conference. Why Shimla Conference was held and why Shimla Conference didn't yield the kind of result it should have. So actually, Britishers were keen that Tibet should remain as a buffer. But they realized that Tibet cannot remain independent. So they felt that the best option would be for Tibet would be to be a suzerain of China, but with autonomy. So this is the solution Britishers thought that should work. So they called for a tripartite conference. The Chinese agreed for this conference with a lot of difficulty and a lot of reluctance. So when initially this conference started, Tibetans said that we are independent. We are an independent country and we want to be independent. China took the other opposite side. They said they are the integral part of China. And so they would be assimilated into China. So finally, a compromise was found that they will be divided into outer and inner Tibet. Outer Tibet will have autonomy, and and it was also agreed by China that they will not ever make Tibet as a province of China. This was accepted by the. However, the Chinese, as we all know, that the Chinese withdrew from this treaty, and they are not signatories to this treaty. In this treaty too, the Tibet-Ladakh border never came up for discussion because it was always considered as a settled border by everyone. So this is as far as the Shimla Agreement is concerned. Then let's look at Ladakh after independence. As we are all aware, China occupied Tibet in October 1950. It launched a simultaneous offensive from the east and the west by using Indian territory of Aksai Chin. And thereafter they signed a 17-point agreement with the Tibetan officials. Although Dalai Lama was in exile at that point of time, on that basis, Tibet claims that this agreement is not valid. This 17-point agreement, for the first time actually, gave legitimacy to the control of Chinese over the Tibetans in whatever form that they are doing this. During this period, the Chinese Premier Chou En-lai, in a meeting with the Indian ambassador, he had very clearly said that Indian interests will be safeguarded. And he insisted that there is no boundary dispute between India and China. This was said by no person less than the Prime Minister of China. The seemingly a peaceful Panchshil Agreement was signed in 1954. It failed to prevent future disputes. And almost immediately, the first dispute came up in Baravati, the most settled portion of Indo-Tibet border. And this dispute even continues till date. It is 3 years later, in 1957, that India discovered China's construction of the strategically important Tibet-Xinjiang highway. As this fact was again proven that why it is important for Tibet, for China, as instability gripped East and Central Tibet, the Xinjiang Tibet highway became very important for Chinese. They put a lot of effort on improving this road. And they built a lot of infrastructure in this entire area. So they have, in fact, at that point of time itself, in my opinion, had reached a point of no return. So just a word about our religion and culture is a very important part of India-Tibetan, Ladakh-Tibet relations. And if I start speaking on it, it will be actually a talk by itself. So I will just finish by saying that Indian route to China passed through Kashmir, Nubra, Karakoram, into the Yarkand Valley, and it touched a better portion of Ladakh. So Indian influence can be seen in Ladakh from the Indian inscriptions which date back to 3rd and 2nd centuries. Number of them can be seen in Ladakh. Whereas the earliest signs of Tibetan influence appear only in the 11th and 12th century. I finish with my talk here. I would sum up by saying that India has a very, very strong case for having Ladakh, Aksai Chin as an integral part of our country. It is very unfortunate that a bigger neighbor has come and occupied our lands. So this is, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak here.